Hello, Word Nerds! Happy Sunday and welcome to our final live chat of Season 4. Very, very exciting. So this is, as usual, because it is the end of the month, our book club. For this month, we read 1,000 Pieces of You by Claudia Gray. I believe this was my recommendation because I really, really enjoyed this book. So hopefully you guys have read this already because it is fantastic and because there are going to be a lot of spoilers in this chat. If you haven't yet, I definitely recommend it. So stop this for now, go read the book, and come back later. To kick things off, we're going to do our usual star ratings and a quick, what we thought of this book. So Emma, you're up first.
I'm going to give it a good 4.5 stars. I read it last year, and then I reread it this week just to refresh myself. And I looked, and when I read it last year, it took me a day to read it, and this time it took me 2 days. So it's a really long read, definitely. And yeah, I think, and we'll probably get into this a little bit later, there's definitely things about it that get a little bit ridiculous sometimes, and there's a lot of suspension of disbelief that you have to do. But I think it's really fun, and so it's just a really fun book, and I get really into it every time I read it. So,
Rachel.
I'm going to also as well give it a 4.5 stars, mostly because for the ending. The ending made me a little bit mad, but the rest of it, I thought it was so cool. I finished it in a day and a half. It came out of friggin' nowhere, just right out of left field, and I ended up really loving it. I thought it was fun. There was a little bit more romancy than I was expecting, but overall, I thought it was a really neat concept, and I thought she pulled it off fairly well.
And Megan.
I have a lot of mixed feelings about this book. Ultimately, I gave it 3.5 stars. It was very much not what I was expecting. I was expecting this high-octane James Bondy thriller hunting down a murderer through dimensions, and it was a romance with really cool dimensions. And I struggled a lot with Marguerite's autonomy throughout the whole thing. But I feel so complicated because I tore through it like everyone else, and I definitely want to know what happens next.
First up, I have the puppy behind me is starting to whine, and I can't mute myself while I'm talking, so we're just gonna have to roll with it. But I'm also gonna give it 4.5 stars. I'd almost even give it 5. It wasn't a perfect book, but for what it was, I really loved it. That it was just such a fun read, like everyone has said. And I've read it twice now as well, and it was just, I don't know. I really liked the concept of it, and there were so many cool things they could do within the framework that she set up. So I am a little bit in love with this series. So next question, does anyone have a favorite dimension? Mine is Russia.
Yeah. So I like that idea, and this is just kind of a side note, but I love the idea of one small choice can forever change everything. So even in the realistic dimension that she went into that was really similar to her own, how she's I'm back in my own dimension. She looks and there's a blanket that's a different pattern, but it's the same colors. And she's oh, that's weird. Or just because her sister, gave that to her instead of the other one. So because she wore a blue shirt that day and not a green shirt, just that one little thing of that one small decision forever changing the future. I just think is so cool. Also, when she really got into all of these really intense dimensions, I just love to see oh, what if that happened? What if this happened? And yeah, what if they never left Russia? And I loved the Russia dimension. I thought it was so cool. It was a little bit weird because I'm guys, you're in the 21st century. You probably should have invented a steam-powered something or other by now. But other than that, I thought it was really cool.
Yeah, I thought the dimensions were so fun. Just all of the what ifs. What if this happened? What if global warming was accelerated and now everyone is oceanographers and
super neat.
I feel it's a very unique idea. There's so many time travel books, and she very easily could have made this another time travel, but instead she chose dimensional travel, which I feel is very different and a cool concept. So.
Yeah, I'm definitely getting more into, because I was never a huge fan of both time travel or dimensional travel, but just the stuff that I read lately, I'm really getting into it. I think she definitely helped, because it was a very positive experience while reading that book. This is so cool. So, and I like how in every single dimension she somehow still has a piece of herself. She's artsy, so in one dimension she paints, and in one dimension she draws, and in one dimension she's a fashion designer, that kind of thing. I just love that. It was so cool how that was the thing that carried over into every dimension.
And I loved how Claudia, she always gave us like a very good feel for what the world was right from the start. Like we knew where we were and why things were the way that they were in just like a page.
Yeah.
Megan, your audio is weird for me. I don't know if it is for you. Yeah, very gravelly.
I'll fix it. Keep going.
So I'll admit I'm kind of struggling with questions because I read this series so close together. I'm not totally sure what happened in which book.
Gotcha. It's all good.
So,
Well, let me just talk
Rachel,
about
you
stuff.
had feelings. Go for it.
I did have feelings. I had very positive feelings. Just the idea of like the whole one small thing can change everything forever is just a really neat idea that I kind of like think about daily. So like, oh, like what if I had talked to that person instead of talking to that person? Like what would happen? So just that kind of thing. And I really loved how it was almost time travel, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
But then I really like the idea of like moving into yourself in every dimension, like changing your consciousness instead of just traveling there. So it's like, well, how do you just like travel dimensions? Like what would happen to like the space-time continuum? Like how does that work? But she made it so that you jump consciousness. I thought that was a really good idea. But now I'm wondering like what was happening with her own body and her own dimension. Like who was there?
I also like thought it was, well, it says that you disappear. Like when you leave your body, you disappear, yeah. Because that's why her dad disappeared. Spoilers.
Right.
My big question with that though was like, why didn't her dad's body reappear where it left?
I don't.
Like, why didn't he go back
He
up
was,
in the
he was
river?
last at the university, I think. I don't think he was in the car when they drove it into the river.
Oh.
They caught him at the university, sent him to the underworld dimension, and then drove his car into the river. Because they didn't actually kill him; they just took him away. Yeah.
Okay. I thought
That'd be terrible if he like reappeared still in the river drowned.
I was so stressed out because I'm like, he's gonna show back up in the river. How are they gonna save him?
Well, see, like even from the very beginning of that, when they're like, "Ooh, like he was just like in the river, but we can't find the body." I'm like, "No, he's not dead. We all know right now, off the get go, he's not dead. He's probably just in another dimension." Like, come on, guys, we know this.
I didn't figure that out, but I did not trust Theo from the very beginning.
Yeah.
Right.
I was like, how are you letting this
It's definitely
18-year-old
him.
girl travel when she like with like one that may like a device that may not work and might kill her? Like I did not trust him.
Yeah, no, I did not see the thing coming that was like, it was a different Theo's consciousness. I did not see that coming, but I didn't trust Theo from the very beginning. I was like, you're the only other character here that could possibly do anything wrong. And then when we're in the first dimension, like that weird futuristic London, and he's like doing drugs, and we're like, something is wrong with that. But then also that made me feel so sad for him, because I'm like, Theo, my baby, like it's just such a like a sweet thing. So, like you just want to be loved, and then you're just like doing all these drugs, and I'm like, no, this is not good for you.
See, I did not buy that was drugs from the beginning, because she says that dimension's Marguerite would have snorted cocaine, but she doesn't ever say that she's feeling the effects of addiction. So then when Theo's like, oh, this body's addicted, I was like, obviously not, because Marguerite is.
Good point.
I didn't even think about that. That's very true.
Yeah, I did notice rereading it, like Claudia Gray like drops clues really early on, like on page 25. He calls her Meg, and it's like, Theo started calling me Meg a couple of months ago. I'm still not sure if it's Meg or cute. It's because it's a different Theo. Like he suddenly started calling you by a different name.
Oh. See, that's a good thing about rereading it, because you just pick up on those little things that you did before.
Yeah.
Oh, I love this. It's like sweet and heartbreaking that another dimension's Theo was like, I'm never gonna have a chance with my dimension, but maybe I can have a chance with another dimension. And I'm like, that's like really messed up, but like also kind of cute, but then also like really messed up.
At the end, when it's finally like her Theo again, he's like, the other Theo ruined my chances with you, didn't he? And
It's like, okay.
I'm like, sorry.
It's so cute, but then also I'm like, all right, everyone's in love with you. Like, all right, okay, like, sure. You can't just stick to your own dimension. Like, just guys.
I want you guys to read the other books. There's so much to talk about.
Oh, okay then.
I was definitely, this kind of goes along with what Megan said about being surprised that it was more romance than like thriller cheap novel. Because I do remember being surprised the first time I read it that so early on in the book you find out that Paul isn't the one who killed her dad. Like, because I figured from the beginning, I was like, that's going to be the twist, that Paul didn't actually do it. But like within the first dimension they travel to, she finds out it wasn't him. And I was like, oh wow, this is surprising. Like, what's the rest of
I was
going to be about?
pleasantly surprised that you found out so early, because I was like, obviously he's not the bad guy. How can she not see it? Are we going to have to go through a whole book where she thinks he's the bad guy?
Yeah. I was kind of like happy that we didn't have to go through a whole thing of like misunderstanding, you know. So
yeah, exactly.
There's too many books already.
I did dislike a little bit though that Marguerite kept being like, oh, maybe I can't trust him after all. Like 6 times she did that after leaving the Russian dimension.
Like, what if?
Like,
Yeah, sure.
I thought we were past this.
I do get though that like when the dimension after Russia is where he has like betrayed the family again, and so she's like, oh, if he's betraying our family in every dimension, he really did do it, you know?
Yeah.
But also it's like, come on. After Russia Paul, do you really think any Paul could do that?
Yes. Russian Paul is amazing, and we all love Russian Paul. Well, that was the thing with him where I was
feelings about Russian Paul.
Maybe not everyone loved Russian Paul.
All right, maybe not everyone loves Russian Paul. Please go into your feelings for Russian Paul.
I will going to say first.
Later. No, I'll save it for later.
I felt very icky about the whole thing because, and I get the sense that the ethics of it all is going to be something they delve into more in later books, because she thinks about the fact that this other dimension's Theo was nothing like her dimension's Theo. But I was super uncomfortable with the fact that she took away Russian dimension's Marguerite's autonomy and like made the decision to have sex with this guy who she doesn't know. She's only been there 3 weeks, and she's like, actually, I love him. But then when she leaves Russia, she's like, maybe it was just Russian Paul that I loved, and
it's definitely a plot point moving forward.
Okay, good.
Like,
I would like to read that.
The main series that I can think of where like there's real consequences to even minor things that weren't like the huge plot point things. Like Theo Theo not having been there is a huge thing for him, and like Paul is never sure which version of himself he kind of is, and like it follows through really nicely.
Okay.
Yeah, I did enjoy, even in this book, just a little hint at like the ethics complications of it, like that it kind of goes into that where like after she's made that choice in Russia and everything, that in like later dimensions she's like, wait, was that the right thing to do? Like, let's at least think about it, which I think is a good decision.
But I also hate
thought about it at all. It would be a problem.
Yeah. I also hate that Russian Paul was just like, oh, that's fine. You think that my Marguerite would be cool with it? So yeah, let's just do it again. That seems right.
But it's the kind of thing that, yes, maybe they didn't make the right decision, but like real life teenagers in the throes of a Russian war, right. You've been there for weeks, you're not sure you're ever getting, like, it's the kind of situation where maybe not everyone's always making the exact right choice.
I agree with you there.
Yes,
but
definitely.
I still think she made a terrible choice and did not like it.
She also thinks that, so.
That's good.
Okay.
I want her to feel guilty.
I do. I want her to feel so bad that she took that from Marguerite. The actual Russian Marguerite doesn't get the last 2-3 weeks with her Paul.
Yeah, it's actually so sad when you think about like if she left like at Marguerite is gonna be
when she comes back.
Oh my god, what just happened? And like all this stuff's gonna happen. Like, ow, my heart.
Of like someone just like waking up and someone else has been in their body the whole time. It's just like, what has happened?
Hey, that's a good one. Start on that. Well, so the thing I wanted to kind of mention earlier, I'm just gonna go into like because we were still talking about Paul, how I wasn't sure if I liked him. That was the thing. Like I knew that I was supposed to like both Theo and Paul, and I knew that I was supposed to not like Paul. So I was like, okay, like I definitely don't like you. And then as we started to grow with him, even still, I was like, I don't know if I like you as a love interest. By the end of it, I was like, okay, I like you as a person, but I'm still like really unsure of him as a love interest. I'm not sure what it is about him. And it's actually kind of interesting because when I was just seeing what he was doing, how he was acting and everything, I was like, oh, I wonder if he's a genius, but I was like, I wonder if he has autism or he's on that autism Asperger's scale, because that would actually explain a lot of his behavior. to like the way he learns, the way he interacts with people. So like, oh, that would actually be a really interesting idea to bring up. But I don't know if she meant to write him that way or not. But I was thinking that might be a big thing, a big factor into why she never thought of him as a love interest, and then suddenly did. I'm not quite sure where I'm going with that, but he's an interesting character. But I still don't know if I think of him as a love interest.
It's definitely not your typical book boyfriend. Like, he's way more serious, not fun at all.
He's like a different kind of brooding.
Yeah.
I actually didn't struggle with regular version Paul as a love interest, but I hated that he was like, I can't tell you this because the plot will happen too fast if I tell you the secret.
Maybe I should tell that eventually, like, to whatever boyfriend I have, being like, but I can't tell you this thing. I'm not going to be able to tell you this thing because my plot lines are just moving way too fast.
The pacing. I have to get the
like
pacing.
2 weeks. And they're just like, what? And they're like, sure, I'm writer.
And Griswold said, Russian Paul was devoted, and I thought it carried over with her Paul. That's why I bought the romance.
Mm-hmm.
I do like her, like, conflict afterwards of, like, was it Russian Paul she loved? Is it her Paul she loves? Is it both of them? Is it, like, parts of each? You know, I do think that's, like, really interesting, like, her trying to figure out.
Yeah, there's no set answer. Like, it's just kind of, this is not a situation
There's a
anyone
doggy.
has ever been
There's a
in.
doggo.
Dog.
So cute.
I'm very nervous.
Aww.
Hiding from a puppy.
No.
Yeah, well, so especially at the end with the whole like ethics of dimensional jumping. With there was like the company, like the evil dude whose name I can't remember. And
Conley.
Conley, thank you. How he's jumping bodies basically to have evil plans in multiple dimensions, which just is very ambitious. But that whole idea and how Theodore is in on it in that dimension, and how Paul is in on it in that dimension, and having to like jump back and forth. I just think, first of all, that just would be really difficult for me to keep straight in my head. And then second of all, I'm just like, oh man, like there's that whole ethical thing right there. Like what's like, because you don't know the life of that other person. So you're like, but I want to stop it. So in my own dimension, it makes sense. But in this dimension, it doesn't make sense. So it's a lot. But I really loved that being the plot twist because I didn't see it coming.
Yeah. Well, and like, also then you think about like, for the rest of them that know that this travel exists, now like you're constantly thinking like, is this like my version of this person or is it an imposter? Like,
Oh yeah, I'm very excited to see how they do that in the future books.
This is one of those fun ones where the whole series is already done, so you could just like go in.
Yes.
Well,
speaking of Conley and his company, so this is a really dumb thing that bothered me, but it bothered me. So his like company is like, it's Triad Corp or something similar. Usually it's Triad something. And this is like something that sometimes bothers me in like books when they're like trying to come up with like names of things in an alternate version. Anyway, the fact that they're called T-phones. I actually made a note at one point because I was like, it's not like we call Apple phones A-phones. Like,
fair.
Like, that was your equivalency to call them T-phones, and I was like, okay. Like, and I feel like books do that all the time, where it's like whatever the name of the Apple equivalent company is, they just use that initial in front of phone, and you're like,
yeah.
Well, I was confused because she didn't refer to phones as T-phones until like the middle of the book. The rest of the time, I was just like, I texted him this. He called me. It wasn't like he called me on my T-phone.
It's like suddenly she wants you to remember.
Like, this is not a normal
made by his company. Because that does end up being important when he's able to track her down because it's a T-phone.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is.
I'm very.
How often am I like, I call this person on my iPhone? Like,
yeah, exactly.
Only if Apple is gonna like pay me to
right,
advertise I use their phone.
I will bring up my iPhone in every video, Apple, if you want to.
I'm sure they're listening at this very moment.
I'm very interested in Conley as a villain. I feel like we didn't really learn much about him at all in this one, and I assume he's going to be much more prevalent in the next books.
It's so complicated.
Ooh, I can't wait.
Oh, there's a part in the world that's basically her world, but isn't, where
The one that's still alive?
yeah,
Okay.
where she's in the kitchen and her dad is making blueberry waffles, and,
Which I made this morning for breakfast.
yeah.
I saw that on Snapchat. That was great.
And she says, like, everything is like normal. My sister is talking about these crazy vivid dreams she keeps having, which seems like a super red flag to me for
Oh my gosh, I didn't realize that.
books. And if it's not a hint, I feel like that was a very poor choice to leave there.
Yeah, because Russian Paul was having really vivid dreams about their world.
I forgot about that. Oh, yeah. Ooh, okay, I'm super
Did the yellow
intrigued.
submarine thing come up in this one as well?
No, there's a song. There's some like Beatles song that her dad hums all the time, but it's not Yellow Submarine.
Oh, I like how in other dimensions it wasn't the Beatles. What was it? What was it?
The Gears.
The Gears, yeah. And they go to one dimension, and she's like, "And you love the Beatles?" And he's like, "What do insects have to do with this?" And she just like starts dying laughing. She's like, "No, they're a band. And then he's like, "What?" And she's like, "They're musicians."
Yeah, this isn't a spoiler at all, but one of the things that comes up is that it's a different color submarine. They sing
Oh my
about
God.
it in some of the other
That's
dimensions.
amazing.
That's
That's
amazing.
amazing.
It's all very complicated. But this is a good segue to the next thing I want to talk about, which was like the family dynamics and all of it, because it was pretty important in most of the dimensions.
It was great. I love that family. I think it was really beautifully written. I love that they added the family and that the family was part of the plot line. Because so many, YA people just don't have parents.
And I always love the ones where the families are a big part of it. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, there's enough family in this one that it was realistic, but they're not too much, so that they can still go have adventures.
And like her parents' story in the Russian dimension, just like
Oh my
Yeah, like the sister, like the brother. Oh,
I
him
love
so
that
much.
like she had real sibling relationships with her Russian siblings.
I like loved Vlad. I was like, I want to stay with these siblings.
Can we be stuck here?
Like I feel like we didn't get a ton of like time with Josie, so I didn't care about her.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
I cared about
exactly.
the Russian.
And like I could be wrong with this, but I think she misses her Russian siblings in the future of like they were kind of my family and now they're just not.
She mentions it at one point in this book, like in one of the other dimensions, where she like thinks about like one of them, and she's like, "Oh, like I miss them just as much as I missed Josie and my mom."
Like, they don't exist in this dimension or something like that.
Mm-hmm. And she feels like a piece of her, like a part of her feels like she should be with them. And stuff,
Yeah. This is kind of a side note, and I like how this did come up with the sibling idea, how in one world she has a brother and sister, and just another world she has just a completely different sister. How one of the things that one of my friends always says about this whole interdimensional thing is that like, oh, well, how come in every single dimension they always have the same people? Like that wouldn't make any sense, because people would make different choices, different decisions, and then you wouldn't have the same people around you all the time. So I really like the fact that she did have siblings in one and then not in others, or that even Theo was across the country because he had been born in America, or he was born in France at one point because his family never moved in the Russian dimension. And he had to like travel to get to I like that aspect because it was real enough.
And they acknowledge that there's dimensions that you wouldn't exist in. So there's some where Josie doesn't have a sister and like that kind of thing.
Yeah. Because they say at the beginning that like, if you don't exist, then you'll just go into the next dimension over. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It was all really well done.
Yeah. I'm sitting in a Starbucks right now, and I'm like, in what dimension am I sitting in a different spot?
What's my life like in other dimensions?
Exactly. Like, what other dimension is this full, and what other dimension am I sitting over in the other corner instead of this corner?
My mother is not descended from Russian nobility, so
Damn.
I don't get to have that dimension.
Yeah, there's no scenario in which I get to be Russian royalty.
Like that's definitely what I think I've seen people mention this in like reviews on Goodreads and stuff, that like that whole part that like her mom's descended from Russian nobility, so in one dimension she gets to be a princess. It's like a total wish fulfillment part of the book, but it's like the most fun part of the book too.
Yeah. Well, see, that was the only thing where I actually liked how she pulled it off, because it was almost time travel, but it wasn't. I think that's what really, because I'm like, they're still, like I said earlier, like they're in the 21st century, but they're still using like super old, outdated stuff, and there's still Russian royalty, and there's like steam power trains.
If every
still
single decision anyone ever makes leads to a different dimension, that's definitely possible. Like there's probably like the same ones where they do have that technology.
And in the London dimension, in the first one she goes to, like technology is
like really crazy.
Hovercrafts and stuff. So like it makes sense that there would also be dimensions where we're less advanced. So.
Fair.
Yeah. Like it's so easy to justify almost anything within this framework.
Yeah, it's a cool idea. Well, she pulled it off. That was the thing I was a little bit worried about, but she did it.
I bought it every time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, my dog is being a dick right now.
Ollie, no. Oh, darling, it's gonna be okay.
So my next question was going to be the issues Megan had of like.
Yeah. Give me just a second to yell at my dog.
Please hold.
I'm also on a family road trip right now, so I am in a Starbucks in a public place. It's pretty quiet so far, so I'm sorry if you hear any noises or machines in the background.
Okay.
Let's hear it, Megan.
A lot of it was that it was not the book that they advertised, really. Like, it was very much advertised as a thriller. But a huge thing I struggled with was Marguerite's autonomy. It felt like things were delayed, like she would forget that she could do something so that it would make the plot last longer. Like, she's there and she's a princess, and this guy comes and takes the Firebird from Russian Paul, and like, she's the princess. The first thing I thought of was just tell him to give it to you. You're the princess. But she didn't until 2 pages later. That way she couldn't get it back. And like, she comes, like, nothing, no choice she made it so that she appeared in Russian Marguerite as she was going down the stairs. So it was like, oh, look at this unfortunate stroke of luck. Now you're stuck here. And that it's like so early on in the book that like I can forgive it or whatever. But the one that really made it difficult for me to suspend my disbelief was at the end, where they're like, you drive a submarine here. Go get this wrench from the bottom of the ocean so that you can be alone in a submarine with the bad guy. So the climax is more epic. And I didn't believe for a second that they would let some random guy pilot the submarine because he has a certificate. Like, I really, really struggled with that. And I did not believe that she would get in that submarine. It didn't make sense at all. Like, I felt like it was legit. And then she villain monologues when she's in the submarine. She's like, look, I'm got your Firebird.
I was like, get in the pod and get out of there. What are you doing?
I did like that, though. I did like that little, like, sass where she just kind of like, yeah, go home. Just, like, holds it up. And you're like, oh, my God, that's why she, like, jumped over him and just, like, tackled him over. Like, I did like that. I thought it was fun. I thought it was sassy. It was a good. I actually really like that scene. Although I didn't even notice that really until you just said that. I was like, yeah, why would they let him just random dude pilot a submarine? Like, that's a good point. And I get it because I'm like, maybe they only have like a couple of wrenches and they need it back. But yes, that's true. I didn't care. I loved it so much. I thought it was really cool. I've never seen a fight in a submarine at the bottom of the ocean with another dimensional person. So I'm like, okay, cool.
I think the only way, like, really that you can like justify the fact that they sent him into the submarine is that they were like preparing for that hurricane or whatever, and so like probably everyone was super busy doing things and they were like, oh look, there's an extra person, go do this. Like, I don't know, so it's like maybe that. And also they just like assumed that Marguerite could do it anyway, so they were like, hey, you're with her, just go. Because really they meant for her to pilot it, you know, but she didn't really know. I think it would have been less believable if they'd been like, oh, Marguerite, you don't have your license, so hey, random guy, go with her. But since they were like, Marguerite, go do this, and since you're here and eating our food, go help.
But and Like, a storm is coming. Why would you care that much about a wind? Like, it's an expensive piece of machinery, but is it really that important?
I don't know enough about floating ocean city tech to answer this question.
It did make for a very, very high stakes climax, which was cool. But the whole time I was like, why are you even here? How did this happen?
They were hanging in a submarine off of the edge of a cliff underwater. This is very important and very high stakes. Actually, I was very surprised that Paul went back to get Theo. I thought that they would just let that Theo drown. They're just gonna be like, well, screw him. Like, he's gonna have to die here. Like, sucks for you. But no, they brought him back, and I was like, okay.
It made me respect Paul more because it wasn't the underwater Theo's fault. Like,
fair. Yeah,
let him die because the bad Theo had been inside him.
Yeah, you kind of wish people did that. Were like good people more often in books, and not like, this person's not a character, we're not going to need them later, die now.
But again, is there not someone more qualified on that boat to go down and rescue a submarine? Did it have to be Paul? Like, it felt like it was only Paul, so that we could wonder if he made it at the end. Like, why would you send the one guy with a Firebird when you villain monologued to the other that he has no way home?
I think it was very much purely just to show Paul being a good person, that like he would go something.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I was going to say, I did notice, I don't know if this bothered me the first time or not, but like when I was rereading it, there's like the part in Russia, it's like, I think it might be at Christmas when they exchange gifts or something. I don't know. It's the point where she's like, I'm falling in love with Paul. I don't know. Like, it just dramatic at that point where she's like, I love him with all of my heart. And I was like,
I was completely and irrevocably in love with him.
Yeah, I do.
I was like, definitely I'm feeling the chemistry. You got feelings. And then it got like very serious. And I was like, okay.
Well, again, it's a teen book. Teen.
Yeah. You do feel a lot.
That was one of my things where it was a lot more romancy than I thought it was going to be, which I didn't love. I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it.
I do think that when you look at all the titles, it becomes a lot more obvious that they're romances. Because it's always like you. It's like 1,000 pieces of you, 1,000,000 worlds without you. Like, you know, like.
Yeah. Fair.
So, like.
That is true.
Yeah. But yeah, the like marketing, I guess, especially for the first book.
Yeah,
like the blurb is thrillery, the title is romancy, and the cover is like
gorgeous,
beautiful.
Yes, the cover is one of like my all-time favorites. I love these so much.
Beautiful. Well, when I first saw this come out, I had my eye on it for a really long time, but then this was whatever it was, a year or two ago. I was like, I don't know, I'm not like super into that genre, so I never picked it up. And then finally for this one, I was like, oh, okay, well, I probably should pick it up, and I did. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so good. So I think I have to go back and buy it because I just borrowed it from my library.
Like, I'm pretty sure I actually bought this because I liked the cover so much. And then it was just like really good luck that I enjoyed the story.
Oh, come on. We all judge books by their covers. We have all bought at least one book because of its cover. Let's not lie to each other.
Oh, it's so pretty.
It's so beautiful.
There's another book that's come out like kind of recently that has a very similar cover. I don't remember what it's called.
Like A Cold Winter or something.
Something. I see it at work sometimes on the shelf, and I think it's these books. And I'm like, that's in the wrong spot. And I'm like, oh, wait.
No.
That's not it. Yeah, it's got a very similar, like the watercolor and like two different like up and down things. I don't know.
Oh,
It's interesting.
Is it like what genre is it?
I have no idea what it's about. I'll have to find it on the shelf and look at it.
It's a YA. I'm like 99% sure it's the same cover designer because it's so similar.
Yeah, it's definitely YA because we have it in my work. So.
It's something about like a cold winter or something. I don't remember the title. Everyone starts Googling.
Not seeing anything on Goodreads.
I don't know. I know where it is on the shelf at work. So I'll go look for it
I know where it is.
I'll report back.
Okay, thank you. Maggie, you said we had some questions.
Oh yeah, we had a question for you, Rachel, from N. Griswold. Last week you said something about an unresolved subplot that bothered you. What was it?
Oh, I did. Darn. Oh no. Okay, hold on. Oh, man, people are calling me out now. Oh, what was it? I think I said that I didn't like the ending because it resolved weirdly, and that's the only thing I can think of when I say unresolved. It must have been that. It must have been that. I just felt like the ending was very sheared off. Because you have the arc of the book, you have the arc of the series. So at the end of the book, you should be able to wrap something up, at least a little bit. But I felt like it was just like, and then someone just literally just took a knife, and done. That was the ending. And I literally like took the page, and I was in the staff room at my work at this point, and there was like 3 or 4 other people. I was like, what the hell? I just like slammed it down. I was like, what's that? And everyone was just like, you okay? I was like, what's the ending? What happened? And they were all just like, okay, calm down there. I was so mad because I was like, this isn't an ending at all. Nothing wraps up. So that must have been what I was talking about. And if not, maybe I'll remember it later. But that was also why I docked marks, because I just felt the ending was really weirdly wrapped up.
Yeah, I don't think I felt that, but I think you definitely, like, the point of the book changes once you find out her dad's alive, and that becomes, like, the end of the book is getting her dad home, which is not what you expect when you start the book, because you just think he's dead. Well, you're supposed to think he's dead, at least.
Yeah, actually, I thought it was so sweet that his consciousness is in that dimension, and so he's humming the Beatles song. And she's like, "But the Beatles aren't in this dimension," and I was like, "Oh my god!" And then like the father-daughter talk. It was just so sweet. It was nice. I almost cried.
Yeah. Yeah, I think all of like the big plot twist reveals were done very well, so that like even when I knew Theo was going to be the bad guy. I just didn't know when or how she was going to reveal it. Like, it was still a very cool reveal. Now I just really want to find that book cover.
Yes, I know.
Picturing it so well.
Bless him.
I think we've covered all the major plot points and all that. Book club's so hard, especially when we all pretty much like the book. But,
yeah, exactly. We got like 40 minutes. That's not too bad.
Yeah, that's not bad at all.
That's not bad.
Except for the fact that we're not back next week. But
yes.
I did realize while reading this book how much like my food cravings are based on things I'm reading and watching. Because
you wanted lasagna?
After reading this book this week, like this morning I made blueberry waffles for breakfast, and then for dinner I made lasagna. Because like all week long I just wanted blueberry waffles and lasagna because they talked about both of those foods so much.
I liked how the lasagna thing was very distinctly based with Paul, and I think that was a really sweet idea. And I also really liked how she kind of put it up against when Theo and her are making lasagna. Yeah. Like I love that certain things or actions can mean so much with one person and mean nothing with another person. And then the whole blueberry waffles thing with her dad was just really sweet. Like it was something that just kept carrying over.
And like I do think like it's one of those really good examples of how like some of the best romantic arc building is done in like little moments. And like when she remembers the time they made the lasagna together, like it's such a good scene. And like there's no kissing, there's no hand holding, there's nothing like actually romantic about it. But like you start shipping it in that scene. You're like, oh my gosh, they made lasagna together.
Agreed.
Yeah. I'm excited to see if her sister is how much of a bigger role her sister will play in the next one.
Oh, I just remembered something because you're talking about that. Okay, so the thing that I thought was a little bit weird that I couldn't quite believe was that the company, the Triad Corporation, was trying to make someone able to jump dimensions, like multiple dimensions. And so they just like set off that weird like blinking machine. They were just like, oh, someone will be in the room when it goes off, and then that person will be special. And
well,
they
specifically wanted it to be They specifically wanted it to be Marguerite.
Oh, was it? I thought they said that like Josie was there.
No, Josie was the backup.
And then all of a sudden,
yeah. Josie was their backup, but they wanted it to be Marguerite because they knew that like everyone loved Marguerite, like all the important people, like her parents and her sister. Well, her sister's less important. Like her parents and both boys loved her.
Right,
they knew she was the perfect like.
Really less important in the other books, so like it like there's reasons for a lot of it. Some of them I would believe she like figured out after finishing the first book of like, yeah, this could work. rather than like intricately plotting the whole series. But
Yeah. I just felt it was a little bit weird being like, we're just gonna, it's one blinky machine and someone's gonna get flashed in the face and then everything is gonna be okay. I was like, what? Okay. It was like super weird sci-fi.
Random story, but Claudia Gray was actually one of the first authors I ever saw live after I had decided I wanted to be an author.
So cool.
She like came with Kirsten White and a couple other authors to the library where I was going to school at the time. And I remember just being like so starstruck with her, even though I hadn't read any of her books yet, because she was so cool and like so professional. And I went up to her afterwards and I asked her to sign my writing notebook, and she looked at me like I was a little bit crazy, but she signed it anyway and like stamped it. And she was so nice. And I'm sure I looked insane. I was just like, can you sign this notebook? It's not your book. I didn't pay any money for any of your stuff today.
I always feel slightly awkward talking to authors if I haven't read any of their stuff, but then at the same time, I'm like, but we're all book people, so it's okay. But then, like, also, I've never read any of your things, and I don't know anything about you, but I know that you wrote a thing, so let's be friends.
Apparently, her real name is Amy Vincent, according to this back flap.
What?
Yeah.
What? Oh, wow, all right, then.
Back flaps.
Yeah.
Like, who reads the back flaps? Because they started putting all the blurbs on the inside for some strange reason.
That's so
I think she
weird.
publishes under multiple names.
Well, I actually read Defy the Stars before I read 1,000 Pieces of You because it just, I don't know, I don't even know why. It just looked cooler and it was new, so I picked it up. It was neat. And I was like, yeah, okay, it's like decent. But I actually like 1,000 Pieces of You better. I thought Defy the Stars was just, it wasn't quite up to par with how fantastic the blurb and the idea of it was. Just wasn't quite there, but it was still quite good. I liked it a lot. And doesn't it also kind of have that same idea? Because like in 1,000 Pieces of You, we're jumping dimensions, and in Defy the Stars, we're kind of jumping planets. So it's a neat sci-fi idea.
See, like I want to read Defy the Stars. I haven't yet, and like most of the reason I wanted to read it was because one, I was seeing good reviews, and two, I was like, well, I like Claudia Gray's other book, but like every time I have read the synopsis of that book, I've come away from it being like, I don't know what this book is about other than something about space. Like I've never understood the like blurb for it. I'm like, what is this book about?
Okay.
No,
I
I'm
give it a
doing
read.
the young Princess Leia Star Wars tie-in, which is pretty cool.
Oh, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't read Defy the Stars, but I did read her Spellcaster trilogy.
She's got a lot of books.
Oh,
That's
I didn't even know that she read that. Okay.
I'm dazzled by her because she is such a professional. Like she is always putting out new stuff.
Oh, good for her.
Yeah. And she has like a vampire series that was a bestseller before that.
Is that the Evernight one? I'm looking at her
Yeah.
page.
Oh my gosh! Wow, I missed out on a whole bunch of stuff apparently.
Yeah, that was
She's
a
had
while
like 2
ago.
Star Wars.
It was a
things,
long time
too.
ago.
Wow, I mean, good for her. That's great.
Yeah, like she has been one of the like steady YA authors for a while. Like her first Evernight book was 2008. So.
Wow, respect.
Yeah. And she's published more than 9 books, right? She's publishing more than 1 book a year.
Holy crap!
Especially if she's publishing under another name as well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, since 2008, there's 5 Evernight books, 3 Firebird books, a standalone, Star Wars,
There's also the
and
3
the Spellcaster ones. Yeah, that's a lot of books.
Yeah.
Whoa, that's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, was there anything else we wanted to touch on before I sign us off for the season?
Oh my god, the whole season.
Read the book.
Yes, it's so good.
I don't know if anyone's actually here that hasn't read the book. By this point, like y'all have been going
Read
through
the
like
other
good
book.
45 minutes of spoilers. Like I doubt that anyone that hasn't read it is still here.
Read
But
the
yes,
rest
I
of the trilogy.
probably
It's so fun.
will. I was debating. I was like, when I first picked it up, I was like, I'll probably just read the first one just for book club kind of thing. But I actually really liked it, so I'm like, I probably will end up getting the second one. Especially now that I know that there's like clones. Yo, like sign me up for that.
Yeah, there's a lot of like, what if this very obscure thing? Like, not a lot of like, oh, small change from what I'm used to.
Yeah, exactly. There is one very small bookstore in the town that I'm staying in right now. The little town up the coast, there's a bookstore, and I'm gonna go in there and see if I can find the second one.
All right, well, I guess that's it for season 4, guys. To the people who tuned in for book club, thank you so much for tuning in all year. It's been a lot of fun, and we will be back on
the 12th. 13th?
Yeah.
Whatever that Sunday is.
It's the 13th.
So, and we will probably have a couple of like videos for you guys in between, so don't forget about us completely. And then we will be back to our regular scheduled programming on the 13th and then 14th with regular videos. Thank you guys again. It's been a lot of fun. Read the rest.
And there's going to be a giveaway on the tail end of the hiatus. So
lots of fun things coming.
Keep an eye out.
Things for season 5 because 5's a pretty big number.
5!
So. All right, guys. Thank you so much. We will see you in a couple of weeks. Bye.
Bye.